tonight what we're going to be doing is looking back over some of the accomplishments, the primary accomplishments of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy over the last year, and also talking to all of you about how you've helped to make this productive and important year for us. I'm going to share my screen and show my PowerPoint. Jamie, let me know if it's not working. So I want to start off by, again, welcoming you. This is a picture of the recently renovated paths at Jamaica Pond that I'm sure many people on the Zoom know well. The meeting is made possible, of course, by the amazing support and sponsors, many of whom are joining us here tonight. We really want to thank Bartlett Tree Experts, the Caroline Laughlin Fund, Masco, and Kyle Zick Landscape Architecture. You helped us be here tonight and be able to have this program, and really appreciate it. As you're going to hear tonight, Bartlett's work has been, a big part of this plan for the last 7 years. So it's really exciting to also have them here at the table tonight in a couple of different ways. And then, of course, to our public partners, we do this work hand in hand, speaking on a daily basis with Boston Parks and Recreation staff, DCR, and Brookline. This work and this project, particularly that we'll be focusing on tonight, really happens only with hand in hand coordination with all of them, and really thank them for the cooperation that is required to maintain an amazing 1,100 acre park system with 3 different public agencies. Thank you again to our board of directors who provide us both vision, leadership, support, and help us do as much as we can do with the team and the staff that we have. Sonia and Constance are 2 new board members that joined this year. Welcome. And of course, our park advisors, our board of park advisors. Many of you may know that the Emerald Necklace Conservancy is made up of park groups up and down the Emerald Necklace, and friends groups and community groups and CDCs and a variety of institutions. We really are made up by the voices, opinions, advice, and ideas and energy that we get from these folks listed here. So, and welcome to a new member of the Board of Advisor, the Friends of the Boston Park Rangers Mounted Unit. And then, of course, thank you to all of the elected officials that are here tonight, that also, take the time to talk to us, to give us ideas, to help support the work, listen to us when we say fund the Parks Department more, our docents that offer free tours throughout the Emerald Necklace. And one day we will do more in-person tours again. The volunteers that help pick up the garbage, help us plant, help us do all the work day in, day out we do up and down the Emerald Necklace. We couldn't do this without you. And of course, we are 100% funded through donations. So all of the corporations, individuals, foundations, government that help us do what we do, we really are internally grateful. And of course, my wonderful staff, many of whom are photographed here, they're the way that this all happens. So thank you guys. Thank you for making this evening's presentation. Every year at our annual meeting, we acknowledge volunteers of the year, volunteers that have gone above and beyond. And this year, it seems incredibly important that we honor the folks that for the last 7 years have made the Olmsted Tree Society program what it is. These volunteers, the Olmsted Tree Society founders, the Party in the Park volunteers, and the committee, and the LIFT committee members, and all of the leaders and followers and participants and folks that just helped in any way they could to make the party and the events and the fundraising what it is. These folks are the folks that helped us do the work that we're talking about today, which is at the end of a 7-year pruning cycle, our first time that we've gone through and expected or improved every single tree that needed it in our tree inventory. And it took vision, it took leadership, it took commitment to fund and develop agreements with all our public partners and do that kind of work. Pruning work is not sexy, but man, does it matter. And tonight we really hope that you get a little sense of how this work really mattered. and really does continue to matter and will matter for decades to come. And these are the folks that helped that happen. So thank you. So tonight, to get into the nitty gritty of what we'll be talking about, I'll be spending a few minutes talking about sort of some of the bigger, big picture accomplishments of the last year. And then I'm very excited that Jim Clark from HortScience, also with Bartlett, will be talking about why it's so important that we do tree pruning and this kind of tree care. And our own Erica Holm, our field operations coordinator, will be talking about our tree inventory and the work that we've been doing over the last 7 years, and in earnest, the last year and a half has been a big year for us. We have a panel discussion tonight. Afterwards, we're going to be able to ask questions and hear from you. And Jesse Scott, who was going to join us, unfortunately, is not able to join us tonight. He's got some exciting, fun things going on in his life tonight. So we're very excited to hear an update when he has one. And Ryan Woods, we're really excited to have join us, the Commissioner of the Boston Parks Department. So a couple of things about Zoom. We would love it for, we know you'll probably have questions. So many of you care so much about trees and are so interested in this work. We're sure you'll have questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. It's usually in the bottom, depending on your Zoom format. Put in your questions. And then if you like a question that someone else has submitted, you can push like, and then that sort of brings it up in the poll. And then we can make sure that that question's on the top of the pile and make sure that that one is answered during the Q&A at the end. And also, if you have comments, please please put that in the comment or the chat section at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to start a little bit just talking about what the emerald necklace is. Many of you, I'm sure, know, but there hopefully are a couple people that this might be new to. So just want to review the emerald necklace. These are the parks that we love and cherish and take care of in partnership with the public partners. And the section of the emerald necklace that we steward is the portion that starts at Charles Gate and then wraps around, meanders in its organic way to Franklin Park. It's over 1,300 acres of green space, waterways, including the Muddy River and the other water bodies, the parkways that line them, and all of the wonderful facilities and amenities therein. So this is the emerald necklace that we steward, and today we're going to be talking about some of the important projects that we have been doing over the last year. As you may know, we are again supported by donations from all of you, and all of the work we're talking about tonight is only made possible through your support. I'm going to talk about the public programs, the tree care, our youth program, and some of the fun that we're able to have in the park. This year has been a really exciting year for us in terms of being able to offer more to the park users and to our programs. We, as many of you know, we have a visitor center, a public visitor center called the Shattuck Visitor Center in the Back Bay Fens. With the pandemic and those kinds of safety measures, we have temporarily closed the Shattuck Visitor Center, but we do have displays and other visitor content that we've been investing in and expanding, and it's become very popular. So we're really excited to get that open. As we continue to grow, and we want to make sure that the visitor center really serves a visitor primary function, we also are really excited that we have a partnership with the City of Boston to use the city building, the Curly House, which is a beautiful historic house along the Jamaica Way, close from Jamaica Pond, and hope we'll be able to welcome many of you there shortly. So that is one of the big headlines of this year, is that we've had this space and it's been helpful actually as we've been working really spread out during the pandemic. And this year, I think more than ever, perhaps many people started to really notice what many of us already knew, but it's been made maybe perhaps more visceral for many folks, that the parks are really essential. And it's interesting, these articles were actually written 1 year ago today, that this is a moment that we could look at our open spaces and what should they be for us, that our open spaces don't just function as open spaces, but they also serve a health need and a community purpose and a family purpose. And they've been everything for us. They've been our living rooms, they've been our dining rooms, they've been the spaces we've been able to safely distanced meet friends. So this has been a really interesting year for us. And I was going to ask people, if you have a moment in the chat, perhaps you might mention what's something that was really special for you about parks. Was there a park that was more interesting? You noticed something different about it than you had in previous years? I personally started to hear birds more than I remember ever hearing them before. Perhaps I looked up from my phone a little bit more this year, breathed a little deeper, but I do feel like that was something that I noticed, and perhaps there's something that you had noticed. And if you wanted to share that in the chat, we'd love to hear what those things were for you. During this year, it was really important, of course, that the city and others respond very quickly to some of the important pressing needs of the COVID pandemic. And that meant that, schools had to change, and the way that a lot of programs work changed. But for us, I was really excited that we were able to step in and help with the signage in the parks, and it was really great we got a really rapid approval from all of the public agencies for the signs that we designed and put out in the park. Over 65 signs that sort of explained how to use the park safely, how to be socially spaced, and also reminding people about all the wonderful places they can go in the parks and spread out. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, of course, a lot of people went to maybe parks they already knew, but we do like to think that during the course of this year, perhaps people found a little part of the park that they hadn't discovered in the past. And we calculate that there's enough space for 438,000 Bostonians to be spaced out. So that's a whole lot of people. That's basically half of Boston. So we're really excited that we were able to do that, and you might still see many of those signs out and about. We also took all of our programs that are normally things we might do in person and tried to both invest in those, but expand on them, and do more of that in a mobile method. The mobile tour guide, which we first piloted during our Fog by Flow exhibit, has content year round now, and that was more popular than ever, more people than ever using the information there to learn more about their parks and learn how to get around. We also noticed our map was downloaded from our website far more than usual, and we developed some family-friendly park activities. This is a diagram here of how to use how your children can enjoy the equipment that the Muddy River Restoration provides us, and also a lot of exciting things online. And you can still watch many of these programs on our YouTube channel if you'd like to. Our youth education program, which is normally an in-person program, shifted and expanded to even serve more youth virtually. As you can see here, our planting on Zoom classes, and it meant that we were able to continue to employ as many students as we normally do. In fact, even a few more this year. And really, our team really flexed, and I'm very, very proud. I joke that we all sort of turned into mini TV producers, and I really appreciate how much the team was willing to just, pick up and do more. We continue to be a voice and a place to come together and talk about the needs for parks and envision change at our parks. So here on the left, you see a major project that many of us have been working on to discuss the opportunities that are presented when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has decided to demolish the hospital that is currently located in Franklin Park on an area that had been parkland at one time. And we are working to provide other options for those needed services. After they do demolish the hospital, we believe that there are other opportunities nearby outside the park. We love the idea of being able to restore some of that parkland to the communities around Franklin Park. So that's something we've been spending a lot of time and energy on, and really appreciate all of you that have been involved in that effort. In the middle, you can see one of the photos, the renderings of the possibility of daylighting the Muddy River as it connects to the Charles River. This is an area that is currently, the river's in a pipe and covered with the roadway. And this is a big effort to move that forward, both working with MassDOT, DCR, a bunch of agencies with tons of acronyms. But the good news is we're making real progress there, and very excited to really change that part of the necklace, which has been so compromised in the last 50 years. And then on the right, one of the other access improvements that we're working on to improve access along the Arborway between Jamaica Pond and the new KC Arborway. This section does not have good facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians, and I'm very excited that I think if they haven't started today, they may be starting tomorrow to put down some new striping to provide some pedestrian and bike amenities. There is definitely some long-term changes needed there. We're very excited to see that get going. Our volunteer program, which usually is, we have groups of 30 or more volunteers. Some days, actually, we have 300 for a Muddy River Cleanup Day. We really had to shift how we do that and have smaller groups doing smaller events. But we were really happy that so many people were willing to pick up cleanup kits and sort of do that work on their own. I actually managed a volunteer day a couple weeks ago, and it was just amazing how many people were really touched to be out there and wanted to tell all of us how much the parks have meant to them this year. This is a year that I think Bostonians really connected to their parks and really wanted to help. And it was really great to be able to still provide some simple ways that people can do that. And hot off the press, we're going to include this information in the chat. We have our new annual report that summarizes what I've been talking about, provides a lot more information about the work of the last year and all the work that you helped us to do. So I really hope you take some time and read it. We're really proud of it, and we hope you are too. And one sort of final thing that was really special to me. I know this year has been extremely hard for so many, with all the loss that so many have experienced, really since the pandemic began. And as it seemed that it hasn't ended, and we were going into a winter of darkness and people having to be inside, not just because of health reasons, but also because of cold. It seemed like if we could do something that might brighten our evenings a little bit, perhaps we should try. And I'm really, really pleased that our team sort of brainstormed and came up with this idea to light up temporarily many of the bridges in the Emerald Necklace. So we lit up 8 of the bridges at 6 locations up and down the Emerald Necklace, and man, did people like it. We were taken aback by how much people said, well, how dare you turn them off before St. Patrick's Day? And we said, okay, I guess we'll keep them on. People really loved it. People would like us to do it again next year. We are definitely looking into that. It was a real hit. And we hope we can continue to do things like this that sort of give people a little moment of joy, perhaps a moment of light in what had been and has been a very dark period for our city. And looking forward into 2022, next year, you may know if Frederick Law Olmsted were still alive today, he would be turning 200. And this is a really important birthday, and also a really important time to look back and look forward and think about how perhaps we can take his legacy and the work here in Boston and think about how his efforts and his belief in shared space and the opportunity for space to bring us together, which perhaps we've been feeling more this year than we have in the past. How could we really celebrate this in a way that is true to Boston, true to our neighborhoods? And so we are working with over 50 other organizations citywide to develop a shared vision and for ways to come together and to find space for shared health, shared power, and continue to make strides towards an equitable, vibrant, and verdant city. So I hope that many of you can stay tuned because I think this is going to be a really fun and exciting and engaging time for us to start to work with even more neighborhoods all around the city to see how this vision of public space and what it can do for us could happen more in and outside the necklace, as we can think about how space is so important to us, shared public space. So getting on with the topics and the people that you're all here to hear. You hear me talk a lot, so tonight you're going to hear more from others. We're going to be talking about how we keep the emerald necklace green, and I often think about the Chinese proverb that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. And I think that the time to take care of trees are 20 years ago and to take care of them now, so they can be there in the future. So I'm very, very excited to have the folks join us tonight that are joining us. And so I want to introduce to you Jim Clark, Dr. Jim Clark. He is a friend and has been actually a real I'd say a wise advisor as I started the San Francisco Parks Department, and I had dreams of bringing millions of dollars to improve the trees in San Francisco. And I'm pretty sure he may have laughed at me the first time we talked about it, because he didn't know about a way we could fund it. And he did, anyway, long story short, we did it. And he has been extremely helpful both there, and I'm very excited to hear him talk about the work that we're doing here and the importance for it. He is the managing consulting arborist at HortScience, and now at Bartlett Consulting. He was with HortScience for nearly 30 years as the VP and principal. He's a certified arborist, an honorary life member of the International Society of Arboriculture, and he has served on the boards of both the International Society of Arboriculture and the American Society of Consulting Arborists. He holds a bachelor and master's degrees from Rutgers and a PhD from the University of California, Davis, which is a great school in this and an amazing city for trees. And he's authored several books on arboriculture. He's also just a tremendous human being, and I'm super glad that he's here. Welcome, Jim. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think Jim is going to share now. Jim, you may be on mute.
I don't think so. I may, however, want to tell you a story. Actually, it's not a story. I want to share a secret. It's a secret that arborists know that the general public doesn't know. Maybe it's more tribal knowledge than a secret. What arborists know is that every tree that we get that looks like this, American elm, starts with this. Hi, Erica. Thank you for sending me this. This is the necklace's Arbor Day planting. So just to put it in perspective, if we want an American elm that's 100 feet tall and 80 years old, we start with a tree that's 10 feet tall and 3 or 4 years old. And it takes a long time and a lot of care to get from that planting that took place on Arbor Day to the tree that we see in front of it. And this really is tribal knowledge, or a secret that we arborists know, and that tonight, really, I have to convince you that it's true, and to share why it's worth talking about tree care and implementing tree care in the necklace, and what the benefits are that accrue to you and to the users and to the citizens of Boston by doing so. So the essence of my comments tonight is part of this secret, that planting alone is not enough. Planting is a necessary component of maintaining and creating and maintaining a park or an urban forest, but it's not sufficient. That growing a large mature tree like that elm or these fire damaged pines requires care. and it requires care over a long period of time. And if we're going to create and nurture Boston's urban forest, that requires caring for a large number of trees over a long period of time. That's the essence of my comments. What is the value of tree care to the emerald necklace? The power of tree care, the importance of tree care to the emerald necklace and to the people of Boston. And Karen asked me to talk about this. What is the value of tree care? What are the outcomes that occur when we care for trees? We start with what's an urban forest, right? The naturally occurring and planted trees within a community. So you think about Boston's urban forest. Here's a generalized view of it. And there's no question, the necklace, the emerald necklace, is a key element, a substantial portion of Boston's urban forest. And there's no doubt that the challenge that the Conservancy that you have taken on to manage that resource is an ambitious one, a daunting one. And you can imagine what would be the impact of the loss of tree canopy or of the substantial portion of the emerald necklace's trees. Imagine all the trees in the emerald necklace were American chestnuts in 1910, and every one of them would have died. Between 1900 and 1950, chestnut blight killed over 4 billion trees in the eastern United States. And that's really not a one-time thing. We face that kind of threat even today. So I ask you rhetorically, what would be the impact of the loss of the substantial portion of the emerald necklace's trees? I think you already know the answer to that. So let me start by telling you that the trees of the emerald necklace provide environmental, ecological, economic, sociological, psychological, and health benefits to the people of Boston and to the users and to the people who live near the emerald necklace. And let me describe what some of those benefits are. The most important thing I can say is that there is a direct link between trees and tree care and the scale of the urban forest, of the benefits provided by the urban forest. And here's how I think we scientists would probably think about it. That tree care, here described by Jess Vogt as maintenance, becomes tree and urban forest structure, which leads to tree and urban forest function, which results in environmental, ecological, health benefits to you. And those benefits have value. They can be quantified. I don't think monetized is right, but quantified and valued is a better way to put it. For example, in New York City, the Million Trees campaign calculated that for every dollar invested in tree care, it returned $5.60 in benefits. And I'm going to spend a little time talking about those benefits. So there's a direct link between tree care and the scale of the benefits provided to the urban forests. And that link is connected also by maintenance. So that if we have poor maintenance or a lack of maintenance, we wind up with fewer benefits and actually more costs. So there is a direct link there. And well, I already told you that already, because it takes a long time to grow a big tree. Now, the most important tool that we're using today, say in the last 20 years, is a program that is a product of the Forest Service and the Davey Tree Expert Company, now the Arbor Day Foundation, Casey Trees, and the International Society of Arboriculture. And it's a suite of urban forest management and analytic tools called iTree. No doubt the Boston Urban Forest Management Plan will present an iTree analysis in some form, and because it is the primary tool that is being used these days for this analysis and evaluation. And iTree assesses specific benefits, not all of the benefits, but specific ones. It identifies and analyzes forest composition and structure. It evaluates pest vulnerability based on species composition. How vulnerable are trees how vulnerable are the trees in the emerald necklace to emerald ash borer, Well, that would be based on the number of ashes that would be in the emerald necklace. How vulnerable are they to oak wilt? We'll talk about that in a little while. iTree calculates the removal of atmospheric contaminants and particulates and estimates their value of that contaminant removal. It estimates the value of the amount of carbon that is sequestered by tree growth put into wood. It estimates energy savings based on heating and cooling costs, the amount of stormwater runoff that is abated, and it has a tool now to estimate human health impacts based on related to canopy coverage. So as an example, here's a product, an iTree product that I read about just a couple of weeks ago, Colorado Springs, Colorado. They have 270,000 public trees estimated to produce $200 million a year in benefits. That is an extraordinary number. That is an order of magnitude larger than any analysis that I've seen to date. And the primary benefit that's provided to Colorado Springs is removing atmospheric contaminants. Fully 120 million of that $200 million is in air contamination, removal of contaminants. This analysis also suggests that the city's total urban forest provides $1 billion in benefits per year. And that is the kind of iTree analysis I expect you will see in the urban forest management plan. Now, recently there was some science that estimated the amount of carbon taken out of the atmosphere and put into trees here in Boston. And the point is not necessarily the amount as far as I'm concerned. It was, what are the ways that we can increase carbon removal, carbon sequestration, by planting new and preserving existing trees? Let me just say that once more, by planting new and preserving existing trees. So their evaluation, it was that the best ways for us to increase carbon sequestration related to trees was to go at both ends of the generation, preserve the mature trees or preserve semi-mature and mature trees, and to plant new trees. Now, iTree does not evaluate all benefits that we know exist and are provided by the urban forest. And one of them is the increase in property value that's associated with having trees. In 2010, Donovan and Butry, who are forest science, USDA Forest Service scientists, analyzed over 2,600 real estate transactions in Portland, Oregon. The average sales price there was $259,000. And if you had a mature street tree, a mature tree fronting your home, it added $7,000 to the sales price of that home, an increase of about 2.7%. If you didn't have the tree in front of your house, but you lived next to somebody that had a tree in front of their house, that added $1,800 to your sales price. So having mature trees in the front yard, along the street, in a residential neighborhood increases the sales price of a residential home. Now let me turn to the social, psychological, and health benefits of the urban forest. And it would be easy for me to start by talking about forest bathing, but I'll let you go to your browser, go to Google, and if you type in forest bathing Boston, there are plenty of groups and people who will take you on a forest bathing experience in Boston or nearby, and you can enjoy one of those forest bathing experiences. I'll simply say that the forest bathing experience is connected to some fundamental science, that an experience in nature is restorative, that living in a city is stressful. It leads to mental fatigue. And when we have an experience with nature, it relieves that fatigue, that mental stress. And then that has broad outcomes on our health and well-being. Broad outcomes on our health and well-being. And one of the ways the science has described this most recently is by talking about greenness, which I think of as canopy cover. So Boston has about 28% canopy cover. That means of the land area of the city, about a quarter of it, just over a quarter of it, is covered with green, with trees. And you'll find out in the Urban Forest Management Plan whether that is still the case. I think in 2007, the city had a goal of increasing that to 35% over some period of time. So residential greenness reduces mortality in elderly populations. It reduces depression. It increases birth weight. It reduces anxiety in young teens. This is all related to the amount of canopy cover. If you live in a neighborhood that has lots of canopy cover, your health outcomes are going to be better than if you live in a neighborhood without good canopy cover. And although Boston has 28% canopy cover, that is not evenly distributed across the city. There are places where it is denser than others. Another outcome is birth that comes to us from health benefits is birth outcomes. So Jeff Donovan, again, here he is, in 2011, did an assessment of birth outcomes as measured by small for gestational age. And when you have tree canopy cover, you live in a neighborhood with tree canopy cover, you have a reduced risk for having a smaller baby. And we know that health of babies is related to their birth weight. And we know that full babies that are smaller have other issues that come forward. I also want to point out that we do have onesies available for the Emerald Necklace for your grandchildren. And here is just a sales pitch a little bit. We can sell some product tonight. Now, these benefits that occur, psychological and health benefits, accrue even when we're just staring out a window in nature. And in fact, the first the first scientific paper published in like 1963 dealt with people who were in the hospital for gallbladder surgery and whether they had a view outside their window into landscape or they had a view outside their window into parking lots. And of course, if you had a view into the landscape, you left the hospital earlier, had fewer complications, required less pain medication. And that kind of study has been repeated again and again. And for kids, tell your kids, if you have young adults, tell them to sit next to the window and then never criticize them for daydreaming and staring out the window, because the kids that have a view of nature in their classroom score better on their tests than children who don't have that view. I can't make this stuff up. It is absolutely true. The science about psychological and health benefits is exploding, and not an issue of our scientific publications goes by without lots of discussions of these benefits. Now, how does this work? Well, the first part I think we have very well demonstrated is a stress reduction. A second, having being an opportunity to be outside in nature is a buffer against stressful living. We really can walk it off. And we find that people are more likely to be outside when there's canopy. And so they're likely to have better social contacts in the neighborhood. And of course, if we get outside, we're likely to have more physical activity. So the connection to each specific benefit has not necessarily been made. I think there's still general theories about that. But we understand that it's based in this mental fatigue and the stress reduction. So let me turn now to some comments about tree care. I think of tree care activities as being this range of services. Starting with species selection, what are we going to plant? What are we going to install? Planting and aftercare, pruning, risk assessment and abatement. Tree removal is part of tree management. Insect and disease management, particularly these days. Root management and invigoration, and tree preservation planning. So let me speak about a couple of these things. First, with respect to pruning, good tree structure doesn't happen. Good tree structure occurs when trees are pruned, starting from their young time, right, immediately after planting or at planting, and then they receive prunings over time on a periodic basis to enhance their tree structure. Now, I will not disagree if you want to say that there's something really nice about an old, rugged, irregular, asymmetric tree. I'll give you that. But I will argue that if we want trees that have good structure, well-spaced branches, and that doesn't just happen. It takes time to do so. And the time for it to occur is at planting. There's no doubt that we prune young trees and mature trees for one of the same reasons, to enhance their structure. And installing quality nursery stock and providing aftercare following planting and pruning when the tree is small are most likely the most important investments we make towards keeping a healthy urban forest. You know, the 15 or 20 minutes that Erica might spend pruning this young tree converts to hours and hundreds of dollars spent pruning a mature tree. If you think about any of the large trees I've shown you, it's an hours event to prune them to take care of defects or problems that we could have resolved by good nursery stock and early aftercare. Karen asked me to comment about retaining dead branches, which is interesting because my thinking about this has evolved over time. Certainly when I was first trained about how to prune, I would have said, you know, when in doubt, we cut all the dead branches out. And these days, I think my feeling is a little bit more nuanced, and I'll describe it as, if there is a no target, if we're in a place where branches cannot fall on benches or benches, picnic tables, places where people are likely to congregate, I'd say retain dead branches. But if they're in a place where there are targets and you look up at a tree, who wants to sit under a tree that looks like this? I think we need to remove everything that's more than 2 inches, certainly, and perhaps more than 1 inches in diameter. You can imagine that if a 1-inch diameter branch fell from some height, it could really injure a person. So thinking about the size of the branch and whether there's a target would be my comments about why or we should or should not retain dead branches. Another thing arborists can do, and part of tree care, is managing pests, is pest management. Here is the existential threat to the United States ash population, native ash trees. This is the emerald ash borer. Every entomologist that sees this or presents a talk about it says it's such a beautiful, beautiful little insect. It's so beautiful. And yet it kills 100% of the ash trees. All right, 99.999% of ash trees. And it does so quickly, effectively, and without remorse. So here's some of our Emerald Necklands Conservancy staff standing under a big white ash, and that tree would be dead in less than a year, perhaps 18 months from emerald ash borer. Now the Conservancy, as best Erica tells me, doesn't have a large population of ash, so the effect on canopy cover is not going to be that great. What would be an important pest is oak wilt, which is in Massachusetts and kills trees in the red oak group. And we manage really by exclusion as well as some other arboricultural treatments. In the region is also a disease, beech bark disease, which is a complex between an insect and a fungus, not completely understood. And then you have the spotted lanternfly, which is in Pennsylvania. I don't think it's in Massachusetts yet, but if you see one, you certainly want to notify any local authority. Just call the Conservancy office and they'll take care of it. Another insect that is described as so beautiful by our entomology friends. So here's a consequence of emerald ash borer. It's like the consequence of chestnut blight or Dutch elm disease, or some other really threatening pest that we have. So here is Toledo, Ohio in June 2006. Here it is in August 2006. Imagine you went away on vacation for 2 weeks and you came home and your trees were all cut down. So this results in a loss of canopy to the city's urban forest. And Jeff Donovan has demonstrated that loss of canopy results in increased human mortality related to cardiovascular and lower respiratory tract illness. So if I said early in my presentation that one of the benefits that urban forest canopy provides are related to health, certainly then Jeff Donovan has demonstrated that if you take that urban forest canopy away, there's going to be consequences, negative consequences. And this is one of the examples of that. And there are quite a number of these papers that are coming out now about emerald ash borer and its consequences related to health. Another thing that tree care does for us is it puts us close to the tree, up close and personal. And with a trained pair of eyes, being up close and personal lets us see things that that non-arborists, untrained people might miss, like cracks that have developed. So that is a failure that has already occurred, it just hasn't hit the ground yet. Or a lightning strike that is a failure perhaps in the future, or the development of decay in a tree that has an otherwise full green canopy, or a branch that is partially broken and partially failed, a tree that has a beehive in it. Bees don't excavate wood; they make their combs in decayed areas of decay. So it's an indicator of decay. And sometimes the tree starts to fail and tells us that by uplifted roots and mounding and things like that. And it's when we inspect the trees, when we're performing tree care activities, we get to see these things. So we can then take action before these problems become much more severe. Now, finally, I want to make a couple of comments about tree preservation planning. And the most important one is down below there, that successful tree preservation is a team effort that starts when a project is conceptually developed, right? It doesn't start at construction. It starts back when we're thinking about what are we going to do? How are we going to renovate or redevelop this space? And the 4 key steps are select good trees, design for their preservation, minimize impacts during construction, and provide good aftercare. And what we'd like to do, of course, is start with a good tree, preserve it during construction, and then give it good aftercare. And that's the before and after picture we hope for. And I want to say that it is not the arborist's job to preserve trees. It's the project team's job. Everyone from the designer through to the construction people, to the landscapers that are going to come in and take care of the trees after everyone is gone. So I can tell you a story now. There is a secret in here. I'll tell you about it afterwards. Maybe we have someone in the audience who attended Scripps College in Southern California. Scripps was founded in 1926, and this group of trees, elm tree lawn, there's 18 of them. They were planted in the 1930s, American elms. And over the years, they've had their best and worst. They've had an up and down life, but a part of continuity for Scripps graduates, for Scripps attendees, is that graduation ceremonies are held on elm tree lawn. And here we are, here over on the right. I guess this must be the graduation ceremony from 2004. And this is a profound connection between the faculty and students of staff of Scripps to a sense of place. And one of the great things about Scripps is they have several of these kind of spaces on the campus that are connected to the people's experience there. So in 2004, a consultant who was actually a graduate of Scripps was hired to evaluate the elms, and she recommended removing 5 trees. And at this time, there were only 17 trees left, and this is how they replaced it. Remember the secret I told you early on? This really isn't a replacement for these trees. This is going to be a replacement in 30 years, not tomorrow. And And so I was called in because the college really didn't want to do, they didn't want to remove these trees. They did not want to lose the connection with this space. And I think that was from everyone from students through faculty to staff. The grounds manager knew what needed to occur, but she wasn't able to really make an argument that was forceful enough to overcome the emotional reluctance, the emotional connection. So I did something that was one of my smartest moves in my consulting career. I said, you have time, why don't you contract grow the replacement trees? And you can grow them till when they're specimen size, and then you graduate the class in June of 1 year, and the day after graduation, you cut down all the trees and renovate the area and plant the new trees. And then the next year, the graduates will come back to Elm Tree Lawn. It won't be the same, but it'll look like this. So this happened in 2008. Here's the Christmas card I got in 2008 after the trees had been installed. Honestly, they could have left the trees in the box for another year, but they were ready to do so. And here is a picture of Elm Tree Lawn a few years later. And there's so much. This is Incipit Vita Nova. A new life begins, or here begins a new life, is one of Scripps's mottos. Maybe it's their college motto. And when discussing this after it occurred, the president of the college used the phrase, a new life begins, to describe Elm Tree Lawn. There's so much here that encapsulates the idea that tree removal is part of the tree management process, of the connection of a place to people, people to a place, that iTree are none of us are ever going to be really able to evaluate and quantify and monetize or value, but we know that it's there. And so that's my Scripps College story. I think this was Scripps was really a positive outcome. They knew they needed to do something. They took an action which was a really acceptable one, a practical one. And although the trees weren't as large when they were planted as the ones that were removed, the sense of place was retained. And I think if every tree project could turn out like that, we'd have an urban forest with even more benefits. So let me speak about the positive outcomes of tree care. I think you already know the secrets. Improve tree health and structure, enhance stability and longevity, reduce pest infestations, or perhaps I should say, reduced impact of a single pest infestation by increased species diversity. We manage invasive species and we can improve root and soil health. So the two messages I want to send home with you are not secrets. They're something I want to just make sure that you appreciate. That abatement mitigation of the most significant maintenance challenges comes right out of tree care and inspection. That what we're trying to do is spend the resources that are available in the most practical way. And we do that first by really going through this process of thinking about where are the most important problems and challenges and opportunities. And the second is that an outcome is enhanced function and benefits. That when we have a tree canopy that is healthy, then we're going to have a healthier urban forest. And that means an urban forest providing more benefits. So that's my tree care story, really my argument for tree care. And again, I'll tell you the little secret. This is a tulip tree, Liriodendron tulipifera. Tulip tree is the tallest hardwood in the eastern US. Actually, it might be the tallest hardwood in the United States. Can reach upward above 150 feet, headed towards 200 feet in height. So this tree is really just getting started. And here it is, getting the kind of care that a semi-mature tulip tree should get. It's got a big growing space to grow. It's got irrigation around it. It's got a nice mulch area underneath the canopy. Those are all the things that are going to take this tree to grow for another 50 years. So I've already convinced you what the impact would be. You already knew this before I started. So investment in tree care is trying to prevent a loss of the substantial portion of the emerald necklace's trees. While removal and replacement are ongoing processes, really the goal is to maintain the canopy over time, because it's the canopy that provides the benefits. So we know the emerald necklace is a significant part of Boston's urban forest, that its trees individually and as a group provide a wide range of benefits, that good tree health and structure are the foundations to providing those benefits, and tree care nurtures a healthy tree and a healthy urban forest. That goes back to the secret I told you early on. It takes time to grow a big tree. And that during that time, that big tree, potential big tree, needs to have some care applied to it. So with that, like the staff, I'll say thanks. Oh, it's supposed to be thanks this way. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Erica Holm. Erica is the field operations coordinator for the Conservancy's Olmsted Tree Society program, as well as the manager of landscape restoration projects, including what seemed to me be the Arbor Day tree planting project. Erica has a BS in biology from the University of New Hampshire. You will find her wandering around Jamaica Plain with her rescued dog, Mango. And it's more likely that you'll see Mango before you'll see Erica, because Mango looks like a young teenage boy in terms of his energy. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. I'll look forward to chatting with you here after Erica. And Jamie, I'm going to stop the share and leave you.
Okay, hi, can you hear me? A little trouble unmuting there. It seems like I may be able to be heard now. Thank you, Jim, so much for the wonderful presentation. You said so many things that run through my head on a daily basis, and I really appreciate your work and your ability to explain everything so clearly. So as we just learned from your fascinating talk, our urban tree canopy is vital to our city for so many reasons. My name's Erica, Field Operations Coordinator since June of 2020. And at the Conservancy, we're so grateful to have a robust tree management plan for the Emerald Necklace's 1,100 acres and over 9,000 inventoried trees. I'm going to talk in more detail about the work that we do and what we've done since 2014, when our Olmsted Tree Society program was launched to care for the Emerald Necklace trees. So in this presentation, I'll be covering what we do to care for trees in the necklace, what and who guides our land stewardship decisions, how it's all funded, and how our work will continue to fit into the mosaic of the urban canopy in Boston and even the greater Boston area. I want to start with the boring part by defining some terms that I use daily and that, you know, they can be a little intense, but I promise we'll make it through the definitions. So tree inventory, that's how we know what trees we have, how many we have, what kind they are, their location, their condition, and their needs. So already it's a lot of information. And of course, we store photos of the trees too, so we can go back and look at how they've grown. The most important concept to remember about tree inventory is that we're dealing with a natural environment, so changes don't always happen on a regular interval as we might like them to. An inventory is really a snapshot in time of what you have right then. Second, Jim's already mentioned a lot about arborists, which are essentially trained and vetted tree experts. I like to think of them as tree doctors or surgeons, and sometimes even magicians. They bring new trees to life. And through their project management and their actual activities on the ground, they can bring old ones back to a better state if that's in the cards for them. There are certifications in professional societies for arborists across the country, so it is a real job. GIS, the third word, stands for Geographic Information Systems. Believe it or not, you've probably all used GIS at some point. Think Google Maps. And for our purposes, GIS is where we gather, manage, analyze spatial data and related information about the trees in the emerald necklace. It's a really important tool that we use every day. Number 4 are contracts. These are the written legal agreements and monetary agreements between managing agencies and the contracted companies that will carry out the work. So these often include project specifications or specs if you're on the project management team, which are agreed on by both parties to define exactly what, when, and how the work will be executed. My main job is to create and manage these for the emerald necklace trees. And then number 5 for the ENC are capital P partners are the public agencies, which are the landowners in the emerald necklace. They are the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, the town of Brookline, and the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR. And then finally, number 6, all the work is referred to collectively as tree work. So anything that falls into planting, watering, pruning, soil care, pest care, other specialized types of care, and even removal of trees, as Jim mentioned, those are all part of the cycle of tree care, and we refer to that as tree work quite often. So what guides our work if we're doing all these different things? In 2015, we finalized our Emerald Necklace Tree Inventory, Conditions Assessment, and Management Plan. Now, this is a real document. Here's my copy, and I use this all the time. It's never just sat on a shelf, and we actively use this plan, which was created in partnership with Kyle Zick Landscape Architecture, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, and each of the public partners. The 5 main ingredients or management categories are existing tree care, new tree plantings, woodlands management, soil management, and vista management. But as you heard already, our focus tonight is mainly on the tree care. And so where do we do this work, and how does the partnership actually assess and take this management plan and turn it into ground implementations? It really starts with the owners, the public partners who own the land and where they own that land. So this map on your screen shows the land owned by each public partner in the Emerald Necklace. In blue is the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, yellow is the town of Brookline, and orange is the DCR. You can see that in this area, Boston has the most parkland area, followed by DCR, which owns a lot of the land bordering the parkways. And Brookline owns the west side of the Riverway area. The most important thing I want to note, in addition to where the owners are at, is that on this and on the subsequent maps I'll show, the Arnold Arboretum, the Franklin Park Golf Course, and the Franklin Park Zoo are not included in the ENC tree work. The Arboretum has a wonderful staff of arborists who closely manage every single tree in their collection of over, I think it's like 2,000 species. So each of these organizations, the golf course, the zoo, and the Arboretum, do amazing work, but the work we talk about tonight doesn't include their areas. And so now that we're looking at the ownership, I want to explain, while we're looking at this, how the Olmsted Tree Society works. Essentially, every dollar each partner spends on their tree work in their land within the necklace, the Conservancy also spends $1. So it's a dollar for dollar match. If the Boston Tree Warden, for example, spends $5,000 on tree maintenance in the necklace, for example, maybe in a part of Franklin Park, then the Conservancy will also spend $5,000 on tree work somewhere in the Boston-owned land. Same goes for each other partner for their respective areas of the necklace. I also wanted to mention that the partners each have much larger ranges and responsibilities than just the necklace's extent in their daily job. The match only applies to the areas shown here, but each of those staff are planting thousands of trees in other areas of Boston. Brookline has a whole town to populate with trees, and the state actually has a quite large landmass to be doing tree care on. So I just want to put that as a reminder. So what really makes our Olmsted Tree Society matching program so impressive and important is that since 2014, it's resulted in a combined spending effort of over $4.75 million into the Emerald Necklace's trees. Without this investment and partnership, who knows how our urban tree canopy would look today, especially after hearing everything Jim had to say about investing early and saving dollars. We may have spent 5 times this, for example, going off the New York number, if we had not taken care of this early. So this investment really ensures that not only will you and I be able to sit under a shade tree in the Emerald Necklace during our lifetimes, but also that future generations will be able to do so. And they may not have to do as much tree care as we've even had to do now. They will certainly have to continue though. So let's get into that tree work. This is my day-to-day, so I get really excited about this. First up is the inventory. The inventory of the Emerald Necklace is shown in full on the left as it exists right now. It is 9,116 data points. And yes, the red dots, they're actually X's, but they're very small. The red dots are tree removals that have been done, but you can also see that the green dots, which are our trees, far outnumber the removals in this area. In the middle of this slide is a close-up of a section of the tree inventory at the Riverway. The star in the middle is the location of tree number 2297, which is a 50-inch northern red oak, which is pictured on the right. I included a very stripped down version of some of the information that our inventory contains about this tree. We do collect much more than this, but to give you an example, this shows that it's in fair condition. There's some pruning recommendations to remove dead limbs because there would be a target here. There is a pathway underneath this tree. And then this tree is proximal to water, so it has an above average quality of location. This tree is doing a lot for the river and it's doing a lot for the path. One issue we've noted about this tree is that there is compacted soil around the roots, which means it's been trampled down to a point where water and air can't infiltrate to the roots. So now I'll show you how we added to our tree inventory over time. Here in bright green dots, you can see when each tree was first added to our inventory. We did pretty big pushes to add to our inventory in 2013, 2018, and 2019, with 2013 being the biggest investment. Now, all this inventory could not have been possible without the absolute wonderful partnership and expertise with Bartlett tree experts, who have done all of our risk assessments on our trees and added to our inventory in a very substantial way. After we added all those trees in 2013, our management plan could begin because then we knew what we had. And we will actually be adding to this in 2021. We hope to add trees at the Casey Arborway, which have established, trees that were planted around Jamaica Pond, trees that were planted around Scarborough Pond by our partners. So this will continue to grow. A huge component of managing the information we store in the inventory is always leveraging new technology to use that information. Because what use is it if we don't actually look at it and evaluate what we've collected? So the EMC started this program where we loan out iPads, which we have 4, and we loan them to contractors or partners to track specific tree work projects in the field. This is instead of using paper logs and paper maps. Some old school arborists used to use index cards. And that would be a lot of index cards in this situation. So Brian Maltby, a Massachusetts certified arborist from Maltby and Company, had this to say about our new iPad technology on a pruning project we did in Franklin Park recently. The iPad saved time for the crews, made everything more manageable. It eliminated problems like paper sheets getting mixed up or lost or damaged. And it was also really user-friendly to add any notes that could have been needed for each tree. So we find that our partners and contractors really enjoy being able to look at this information at a glance from the office or in the field. So once we knew what we had and we had the technology to keep up with it, we of course wanted to start planting trees. I'm so excited about the 10 trees that I planted in Franklin Park last Friday on Arbor Day. With the city of Boston, the tree warden came and put in some work hours with some Bartlett arborists who had donated these trees and their work time that day. I brought some lemonades and also some signage to put up for the public. But aside from that small project, in total, all 3 partners in the Conservancy have planted over 750 new trees in the necklace since 2014. We haven't talked about it much, but it's a huge number of trees. And I wanted to focus for a minute on this Olmsted quote. Frederick Law Olmsted is the designer of these parks, and I think he always has a good thing to say about trees in them. So he says, and I ask, if man is not to live by bread alone, what is better worth doing well than the planting of trees? I have to note that doing well is the most critical part of this statement for me. New trees need to be planted with the right species in the right place. They need to be of good nursery stock. I know I'm just repeating Jim at this point, but trees also need to be planted at the right height relative to soil. Mulch needs to be applied in certain ways. You don't want to volcano mulch your tree or the trunk will start to rot out actually. And trees need to be protected from mowers, vandalization, and pet waste. And they also need to be monitored and watered for at least 2 years before they become established as a lasting tree. So you can see on the picture on the left, we put up some substantial fencing and signage so that these new trees will have a chance to become a bigger tree. And we will water them this summer. And then after establishment, like Jim talked about, trees do need a lot of care afterwards throughout their life to remain in an urban space. And ideally that lifespan is closer to the hundreds of years or surpasses 100 years than the tens of years. So now I'll show you our pruning efforts, which are part of that lifelong care for these trees in the necklace. These will cover from 2014 to present day, and I'll give you a little time to look at each of them. On these maps, again, the light green, brighter green dots on here are the trees that were addressed in that year. So in 2014, we pruned or inspected, and inspection is something Jim mentioned as well. That's sort of when we take notes on a tree, but we didn't need to prune it that year. So you can see we touched most parts of the necklace in each year. I'll move on to 2017 to 2019, where we continued our pruning work. I think I noticed my predecessor in the call today, so shout out to them, the folks who were running these contracts before I arrived in 2020. And then in 2020, 2021, and then I have one slide on the end that shows everything combined. 2020 was our biggest pruning year that we ever had. And that was a great accomplishment because despite COVID, we could still provide jobs and employment and big contracts, and we could still do a lot of work. The map all the way to the right shows an overview of all pruning since 2014. It totals 9,018 visits to trees. And yes, it does include some trees that were pruned multiple times. The only trees that remain are the Lift Park trees and some trees in the Riverway. So we're gonna finish those up this year and then we're gonna have a big party about it, I bet. And I'd like to highlight special care for large trees. This is often a question I'll get. And the Olmsted Tree Society does have a heritage tree program where we take a special look at those old, large, special trees. So I chose to do an example. This is tree number 7473, one of my favorites in the park. It's a northern red oak, about 70 inches, and it's in the Shattuck picnic area in Franklin Park. We actually dedicated this tree to Mayor Martin J. Walsh, recipient of the 2020 Olmsted Award of Excellence, which recognized his leadership in historic investments in the Emerald Necklace. I thought it might be fun to show you the use of just one of the iTree tools that Jim mentioned. This is called My Tree, so it's iTree, My Tree, and it can evaluate one tree for some of the ecosystem service values that it provides. So just this year, this tree in the picture provides $50 in benefits, pretty good. And if you look at the bottom right, you can see that over its lifetime, this tree has sequestered over 130,000 pounds in lifetime CO2 equivalent of carbon. Now, don't get scared of that term. What that means is that through its life, the tree is photosynthesizing each day via its leaves. Through that process, it's storing carbon in the new growth of wood over years. 130,000 pounds of carbon is about the weight of 15 average-sized Asian elephants. It's important to note that for large trees, a lot of carbon is stored, but actually the rate of storage goes down over time after it gets a certain size due to natural decay and then maintenance. One of the greatest values of trees, dollar and environment-wise, is in capturing and slowing water that runs off of roadways and other surfaces during storms. This is called stormwater runoff, something that Boston Water and Sewer and the Parks Department care a whole lot about because it really can have impacts on our society. This tree has helped slow and take up many thousands of gallons of water. You can see on the right, the big red circle in the middle says runoff avoided and rainfall intercepted. Those are the stormwater runoff benefits of this tree. And so, Jim mentioned many times, there's a host of benefits that trees provide us. One is economic, but there's also significant health benefits for human and wildlife populations and overall environmental health. Although I provided this receipt-like value assessment, I think the historic value, the awe-inspiring capacity of this tree, and the ecological function of this tree are undeniably priceless. You could probably ask any tennis player on a day here where they'd like to sit after their match, and it's probably not in the sun. So this tree is providing value all the time in other ways besides this dollar value. So where are we going next? Well, this year we're celebrating our first 7-year pruning cycle, but by my math, 2014 was 7 years ago. So we must begin again, and we're excited to do that. We're currently working really closely with our partners to renew our partnerships, which we review every 5 years so that we can accommodate any desired changes that they may have. We're looking forward to digging into woodlands management, which involves invasive species removal, which take over the understory of a woodland, and they actually prevent new trees from coming up. So it's important to get rid of some of that Japanese knotweed, some of those plants that really kind of choke the forest by existing in that understory. And that project is a whopping 215 acres of the necklace. That's the size of 89.5 Copley squares, or 24 Fenway parks. So we have a lot of stuff coming up. We also want to plant trees every year. It's just the most fun thing you could do, and also all the benefits. We would like to keep doing that. And then, as always, tree nerd, but just general citizen, I'd like to incorporate new science and techniques just as one of our actions that the Emerald Necklace Conservancy can help take to combat climate change, along with all the other actions by our partners, which comes to how do we fit in. I've put kind of an image of the emerald necklace, and this certainly needs to be a collaborative effort. We're lucky that it has been, and we're excited to keep going. Other efforts we're integrating with and that we highly recommend you check out are the City of Boston's Healthy Places effort. That includes their heat plan, their urban forest plan, and their open space plan. Also, I wanted to give a special shout out to the Franklin Park Action Plan, a $28 million plan that's happening right now in the crown jewel of the Emerald Necklace. At a statewide level, I have to personally recommend the DCR Citizen Forester. If you found this talk interesting, you will find that newsletter interesting. And the town of Brookline is also developing a climate resiliency plan, which actually has a public meeting coming up on Monday, May 17th. So if you live in Brookline or you're interested, please feel free to attend that and get involved in what's going on regionally. With that, I'd like to thank the Olmsted Tree Society and Party in the Park for funding this work. The members of the public partners, specifically Max Ford Diamond, Jeffrey Enoch, Ruth Helfeld, and Tom Brady, who will run our operations committee and help make this happen, and also the consulting and contracting companies that I work with day to day. It means a tremendous amount to be able to invest in our future via something so indescribably vital and also beautiful as a tree. Thank you so much.
Unmute. Hi, Karen back here. Thank you so much, Erica. I think we're going to move to our panel now, and I think Ryan Woods is going to be able to join us for a few moments. I wanted to thank you so much, Ryan. Ryan is the commissioner of Boston Parks and Recreation. We're really thrilled to have him. And one thing, Ryan, I know it's super exciting that that through your leadership and Mayor Walsh's budget last year, the urban forestry plan is being started for the city of Boston. I didn't know if you would like to mention a little bit about that. There's also some questions that we might ask you, because some people have been asking about sort of how you think that perhaps we can prepare as you work on these plans in terms of climate change, and what could be some good recommendations for us in terms of climate change and how we would address our urban forest.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It was great to listen to Jim and Erica. Very interesting talks. We're very excited about, we had a $500,000 investment in our urban forestry plan, and we were able to select Stoss, I want to read it right, Stoss Landscape Urbanism, who is going to oversee the effort, and they have Urban Canopy Works. Very excited to have a female-owned small business as Urban Canopy Works, who are engaged. They are doing assessments right now of trees across the city. I wrote the neighborhoods down that they've gone through because I'm really impressed how quickly it's moved. Back Bay, East Boston, Beacon Hill, downtown Charlestown, Fenway, South End, South Boston, Allston, Brighton, Mission Hill, and Roxbury are already complete. They have done assessments of all of those neighborhoods. We are now in Mattapan, then followed by High Park, Dorchester, JP, Rosendale, and West Roxbury. So we plan by the third week in June to have a complete assessment of all of our trees. Very embarrassed to say we did not have that in the past. We did not know what kind of trees we had, the condition of those trees. we had nothing. We just knew when we removed a tree, we removed it, and the contractor came and replaced a new one. So now we have an assessment that we're working off of. So it's a great first step that we're very excited. They're using a tree plotter app by Planet Geo that is collecting all this data, and we're going to be able to have this and work off this. So every time we do tree prunings, plant a tree, have to remove a tree, we'll now have a working document to work off of and have. So that's very exciting. We really want this process to be equitable response to climate change. So we are really doing an advisory group with an equity council. We have collaborating partners and an intergovernmental working team. We're starting a community process. So that's a great way to get involved starting this summer, because it's really based on people in the neighborhoods, and we want to hear from the neighborhoods. We are looking at, obviously, heat islands. We're trying to map that with our socially vulnerable neighborhoods to address this, those areas first. It's important to say this is a 15 to 20-year plan. And we hope that this urban forestry plan is complete by late spring or early summer of 2022. So that will be our working guide, but we are not going to just start in 2022. We're going to start parallel, and we're going to start working as we are through this community process. Also exciting, many people may know, we are adding another arborist to our staff that's starting June 7th, coming from New York City Parks, who oversees all of their contracts. So that'll be a big relief to Max Ford Diamond to have some assistance there as a general foreman for the tree division. And last year we upped our investment to just south of $2 million for tree plantings for street trees. So we were planting around 700 to 800 trees now a year. Now we are up to 2,000 is the goal as we move forward. So very excited that we're planting more. As Jim mentioned, we are just around 28%. I think it's 27 point something percent of tree canopy. That's what we were in 2014. And that is where we are currently this year. So it sounds like we haven't made much progress, but if you keep in mind all of the development that has been done on private property and the amount of trees that have come down, the planting of street trees and the work that we have done to keep it stable is great. And that's something we're going to continue. And one other important thing I want to mention is out of this urban forestry plan, we also want to devise policy work out of this to try to put protections on private properties, trees on private properties, and relook at the development process with the BPDA. So there are some protections that could be put in place or make people think twice before cutting down, a heritage tree for development. So we're really excited how encompassing this plan is and look forward to working with the community throughout the process.
Thank you, Ryan. That's fantastic. All great updates. Yeah, it's true that that was one thing that was really fascinating about the analysis that was done, the LIDAR analysis, that though some trees have been lost, a lot has been gained on public property, that it's actually the public trees that really have saved the city of Boston. What could have been a deficit is keeping us at a certain point, and now we just have to figure out how we can even expand on that. I'd love to hear either Jim or your response to a question about climate change. There's a couple of questions in our Q&A about how we might tell the reality of climate change. How should that affect what we do in terms of tree species, tree selection, tree care? Like, how do how does the looking at the future and climate change, how should that change our operations, either the Conservancy's operations or the city of Boston's operations? Jim, do you have any suggestions, or Ryan?
A person sitting in an office in the San Francisco Bay Area of California may not have the same thing to say about climate change as a person like Ryan sitting in an office in Boston. And I'd also say that, the city has a climate action plan, right? So if I think in the East, you have an increase in sunny day flooding, a increase in severity, intensity of storms, as the primary things that are going to occur in terms of climate as the climate changes. So the immediate consequences of that to trees are more tree canopy for stormwater runoff, right? To detain, to hold water long enough that it can then filter into the ground or to reduce the pulse of stormwater, right? That overwhelms the stormwater management system. If we're going to have an increase in ice and snowstorms, we want to have trees that are pruned and are structurally sound. That might mean along streets and highways that we're going to have more salt applied to clear those streets, which means we have to make sure we select salt tolerant species along the street. Those are the first few things that come to mind for me, whereas we're dealing with greater drought, increased forest fires, and really sea level rise, because like Boston, we have so many places that were reclaimed and are slightly above sea level, but don't expect to drive along the Great Highway when we have a king tide, when we have a quarterly tide, because it's just going to flood. So those are my quick comments.
I'd add on, Jim hit the nail on the head with the salt tolerant trees. I mean, that is one of the biggest killers that we see with the amount of salt that's used by, city contractors as well as public works staff along our major thoroughfares in our city streets, for that matter, as it's going right into the tree pit. As right now, our tree plantings that we're doing are seeing a 15 to 20% mortality rate too. So the effort that we're doing and the engagement we're getting from a lot of community members, whether it's Tree Eastie, whether it's Speak for the Trees, or other South Boston trees, other local groups, Emerald Necklace Conservancy, of course, to help us get out there and inform residents of the importance of watering. Like, some contractors are better than other in getting out there to water the trees during the 2-year warranty period. Other contractors would rather take the chance on Mother Nature, and if the tree fails, plant a new one in 2 years during the warranty period. So really trying to engage residents and let them know, especially during those first 2 years, that 20 gallons of water a week is really what's needed. In some times of drought, doubling that to almost 40 gallons of water. And we've started doing tree tags on all of our newly planted trees to let everyone know, hi, I'm new to the neighborhood. I'm your new tree. How can you help me? And also, as Jim mentioned, the Climate Ready plans, if you haven't seen them yet for Climate Ready Boston, it's great to look at them. A lot of the ideas of doing, especially along our waterfront and our coast, of adding more green space and more floodable parks that can take in the water, and 300 plus days a year they can be enjoyed as public open space. And during those storm times, they really can take on the water. So instead of building a plan to build 16-foot cement walls to protect the city, really trying to create these parks and open spaces along the coast, especially in our vulnerable areas. Big is the Moakley plan in South Boston that we're working on, in order, right now, the way the floodplain would go, areas of Dorchester, South Boston water would come in from Moakley and from Fort Point Channel and really flood all of the Back Bay, South End, areas of Dorchester, and areas of South Boston. So there's some critical steps that we're working on now to build a better resilient city. And that's all through the Climate Action Plan, if you get a chance to look at it.
So Ryan, can I say 3 things? Sorry, Karen.
Please.
May I say 3 things?
Sure.
First, are you using gator bags, these green bags that you place at the base of the tree on your newly planted trees?
We are, but a lot of the times, Jim, we're putting them on the stake itself instead of on the tree, so the water gets to the root ball instead of, killing the tree in some situations from overwatering. But yes, gator bags are used.
And when we have road salt that's applied in the winter, we could, it's very difficult to leach. We could. And then I'd say, if we think about what utilities do, maybe I don't want to talk about what utilities do. They plan for peak demand, right? So the strategies about using trees are, how do we reduce peak demand? How do we reduce air conditioner use between 4 and 8 p.m., right? And that's where the trees then become a key thing. And I think what you described with stormwater management was, how do we deal with peak demand? The peak where the pulse is this large influx of water, and how do we get rid of that during an intense storm? And I think you're right, giving it places to go that can be detained and filter in slowly allows you to deal with those pulses, and particularly in places where they can be recreational for most of the year, just as you said.
This is great stuff. I want to figure out an alternative to road salt. I want to figure that out. I don't know if we're going to do it tonight, but if we could come up with something, man, that would really change things. There's so many great questions here. Jamie, are you getting on because we're running long here? Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to mention quickly, I know Ryan needs to jump off, so I don't want to take any more of his time than he's able to give us tonight. But I did want to mention we're running up on our time, but maybe we'll stay on for 10 to 15 minutes. Jim, Erica, if you're available to answer a few more questions.
I'm here for you.
Okay. If you're in California, so it's early for you, Jim. So if anyone does need to jump off, this full program will be on our YouTube and in your emails tomorrow. So keep a look, but we'll go until about 7:15.
Great. So I'm gonna pop to a couple of the questions here. Albert Chen asks, how can we emulate natural succession in the urban soil environment with densely planted bare root trees? That's going to have to be a question for you, Jim, because I don't know if I totally understand it, and maybe you do.
Well, the challenge for natural succession in urban areas, and so you have naturalized woodlands, right? I think, Erica, you call them woodlands. The challenge for succession there is that natural processes and the natural components have been disrupted. So where we have small woodlands, invasive species prevent what would be the normal process, let's just say our pre-disturbance process. And it's very difficult then to find natural succession and to promote it in those locations. So I'll say in the New York Botanic Garden, they have what they proudly describe as the largest assemblage of old growth trees in the United States. Their only management is invasive species management. They go in and they pull out all of the invasive species, and they're trying instead to promote then the natives. And so we can't expect to have sugar maple beech come up underneath a sweet gum tulip tree, red maple, early succession, unless we get in there and eliminate Norway maple and Bradford pear and all of the other invasives that are present. So that's, I'll just say that at first.
Great. A question asked by Ben, given the threats to ash, red oak, beech trees, what kinds of trees should we be planting to ensure a good urban forest in the necklace going forward? Would you just say diversity, or do you have particular trees to recommend?
No, I have no particular trees to recommend. I think I was going to say this is a softball. Let Erica answer that. It's diversity. I
think it's diversity.
If oak wilt affects Texas, the red oak group, we need to plant more white oaks and more diverse species, right? You need to be a site where you can plant the chestnut hybrids that are available, which are really available, but they're limited because they're genetically modified. We need to do what New York did and expand our horizons about our palette. And I think one of the things New York City did, you have to give them credit. They went to the nurseries and said, this is what we want to buy. You start growing them now, and 5 years from now, we will buy them. And they created the market that allows you to walk along a street and find bald cypress and Kentucky coffee tree and trees I don't even know planted along the street. And that diversity is what's going to save us.
Good to know. I love the idea of essentially ordering, contract growing, which is what you're essentially talking about. I don't think we've done that systematically. There's another question here. Susan Helms-Daly says she'd love to hear Jim or Erica's thoughts on the use of pesticides in the care of urban trees. The Brookline Green Caucus has discussed what position we should take on potential warrant articles, proposed state legislation that would limit the use of certain pesticides, particularly nucleotides, I'm probably saying it wrong, and glyphosate. Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
Do you want to take that? Another softball?
answer that, yeah. So neonicotinoids are often viewed as kind of like the bee killer type of chemical that can be used in the environment. And glyphosate is Roundup. So that one has been found to soften eagle eggs. And you know, sadly, just this past week, we had our first second generation eagle death from rodenticides. So chemicals in the environment can have effects that you would never expect. What I mean by second generation death of the eagle is that it was not the eagle that ate the rodent with the rodenticide that the rodent had ingested, it was that eagle's baby. So it's very complicated how these things affect the environment, and it's really important to follow labels on anything that you're going to use in the environment. And it's very important to keep up with the research if you're going to be doing that type of work. So we're lucky to work with a lot of contractors that are up on that research, but we still don't even use those chemicals that are mentioned in the emerald necklace at this point. The challenge of it is that, for example, Japanese knotweed is a rhizome spreading invasive plant that just absolutely takes over anywhere that it's at. And it does that through this really strong rootstock that stores sugar. So even a little bit of a root that's left in the soil somewhere can shoot that plant right up. And one of the only fast ways to deal with that is to do a dab of a pesticide is technically what it is, but it's a vegetative target, and dabbing just a little bit on the root makes it infiltrate down into the rootstock and kills that. So a little long-winded and a little specific answer, but I would say that chemicals can affect things differently than you would expect and for a longer time than you might expect. But also mechanical removal, just cutting things down, may only encourage what's happening underground.
I have two comments to follow up to Erica. I would be against a blanket prohibition of those two materials because I believe that there are places where either of those materials can be our most effective tool. So I take that, and then I'd say, Erica, I'm probably the only person attending tonight's meeting who has had weed pie made up of Japanese knotweed. You just treat those little young shoots like asparagus, harvest them, apply the pesticide, and then you get the double benefit.
Also, the giraffes at the Franklin Park Zoo love to eat knotweed.
Yes, the giraffes, absolutely.
Maybe we can see it in the Boston restaurants.
Yes, maybe we can, exactly, local. Slow food, exactly. Marie Fukuda asks, how can we as park advocates and stakeholders support conversations about species diversity and investment for tree health and maintenance in the Emerald Necklace in the face of climate change and other environmental challenges? So, you know, how can, you know, when we're talking about species selection, and I mean, it is tough because, you know, they're historic parks and people want them to look the same. You know, how can we broaden those conversations and talk about diversity? It is complicated. It is not simple.
Listen to the science. That's going to be my answer, is listen to the science. And that, I would say, you know, if you think about what Olmsted's design intent was at any particular space, he found plants that he identified as helping meet that design intent. And we can find plants that are going to meet that design intent that may be species that are different than Olmsted originally identified. And I think that would be the difference for me of the literal interpretation of we have to use Norway maple versus the intent here was to create a tree-lined canopy and a double row on either side of a walkway. We can find other species that are going to do that.
Great, very clear answer. Steve Wills asks, are there any actions, and there might not be, that individuals can take independently to promote tree health in the necklace? And, you know, and maybe even outside of joining an organized work project. So certainly someone could show up, Erica, and help you with a tree planting, but is there something that Steve or someone else could do to help us with the trees? What can they do?
Absolutely, yes. There's tons of ways, but my favorite is to share the stuff that you know about trees with someone who doesn't know it. So for example, planting the trees in Franklin Park, we put up signage about each species. I'm asking for things like that from project managers that can share with other people who may not think to ask the question, the information that's out there. So my favorite way is to share what you know, have conversations about trees, go outside and appreciate the trees and learn a new species you never saw before. I know it kind of sounds relaxing and fun and not like an action that you're doing, but every little bit of that helps. And having the hard conversations about what species you do want, what species you don't want, what's coming with climate change, having those conversations with family, friends, people you think might not be interested, you may spark interest in them that results in some really good work. So there's my answer.
Are there things that people can do with 311 or the sort of the app?
Yes. Any sticks you see on the ground, trash you find in the parks, if you find someone who's vandalized a tree, or if there's a dead tree, or if the fencing is falling down, or if you notice something about the tree, if you notice a tree is mulched improperly, you could let us know. You could 311 that. You actually can report all these things.
And Erica, that would look like if the mulch was piled up around the bottom of the tree, right? It should be spread out, right?
The tree goes straight into the ground and there's no flare where the bottom of the tree goes like this. It's too deep, and if you mulch it like this, then you're creating that situation. So.
Yeah, so maybe we could even make something on our website of like things to look for. This is bad. This is good. Like that might be helpful just so that people can kind of provide eyes and ears. That would be awesome. Wow, there's so many great questions here. What are some of the salt tolerant species? John from Zoo New England asks. I know that we think of red oak as being a salt tolerant species, and that's why I think at times chosen to use it, but perhaps there's some others we should be prioritizing. Jim, do you have any off the top of your head?
Not a question I can answer.
No,
unless you give me 5 minutes with the browser.
Okay.
All right, 2 minutes.
No problem. But we will. I think that's something we should try and. I mean, I know we have been focusing on salt tolerant species for replanting around the parkways, but we still know that it's, salt tolerant is one thing. Salt loving, I mean, it's really intense what we're doing to the trees. So
one answer to that, which could help in people's independent research about trees they want to know about, you can use the Morton Arboretum's website, the USDA plants database, and you can also use the Arbor Day Foundation's website to look up the acidity, salt tolerance, all these different facts about trees. I do also know that the most common tree in the city of Boston is the honey locust. I think that one does okay with it, and I do think red oak has typically been something we plant near roads.
Erica, do you know why honey locust is the most common tree in Boston?
I don't yet. Do you?
My guess is because it was really popular replacing the elms when they were all cut down.
I see.
Well, no, I bet Claire Corcoran might know the answer to that.
Maybe I should go on a tour with Claire.
I know she's listening. Well, this has been great. I mean, there's so many wonderful questions. There was a question about sunlight, like how many hours of sunlight does a tree need? I know there's a lot of times there's development that is proposed, and we always wonder, at what point are we gonna cause a tree not to survive? Do you have any rule of thumbs for us on that, Jim?
Yeah, if we're in places where we're what we would describe as urban canyons, where that get limited amounts of direct sunlight per day, you want to try and use a shade tolerant species. So, for example, that would not be the place to put sweet gum. You grow sweet gum? Wouldn't be the place to put tulip tree. Any of the birches, cottonwoods, willows, those are really high light intensity requiring species. And if you're in a place that has some limited light, you want to put in something that may have some shade tolerance associated with it.
Yeah, well, this is great. There's another question from Clay Harper. Oh, Jamie's on. That means we're over time probably, right? Jamie's like a hook. She's like a person,
Pull you off stage.
We need a meeting manager. Jamie is just fulfilling her role.
Thank you.
I am. Thank you, Jim. There are so many good questions. I just want to say quickly, Karen, before you wrap up, all of the questions that are in the Q&A, I will save and we will get responses to you. So your questions are not going unanswered. So we will get back to you. Again, this will be on our YouTube tomorrow, and I will send it to you in your email. So thank you all for joining us. And Karen, you can close out.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Jim, for coming and responding to our request to say, like, let's talk about why tree pruning is so important. And you did it. And it was really great to see you again. And thank you for, thank you and Bartlett for all of your support for years being a partner on this exercise. And we can only kind of get there through the partnership of a lot of folks over many, many years. And really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you, Erica, for Jim. Sorry, we're going to say something. You don't need.
I want to come out and get dressed up like all those women in their hats and those summer dresses. How do I rent a white suit?
Absolutely, Jim. We want to have you. We want to have you here next year. So much to see, and I would love to give you a tour around the necklace. And thank you, Erica, for going through all of the work of the program. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. This was really great to be able to sort of celebrate getting to this huge milestone. And thank you to all of the donors that made this possible and brought us to this point. More to come, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. So thank you so much.
Thank you.